When you see matching t-shirts and potato salad at a Black family reunion, it's easy to just see a summer cookout plus family. But that's not the truth. For Black people, the first family reunions had nothing to do with potato salad or leisure. They were heavily funded, desperate rescue missions to piece together 4 million broken families. So join us today while we talk about the history of the Black family reunion. I'm your host, Country Boy. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at withmyhistory.com. Also, join me at my Substack. It is linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's get started. Before we talk about us, we had to look at how the American family reunion got started. It wasn't a cultural tradition. It was a product of the Industrial Revolution. Before the 1850s, families didn't hold reunions because they never left each other. They lived and died on the exact same farm in the exact same area. When factories started booming, millions of young white Americans left the countryside and flooded into the cities for wage jobs. By the 1870s, railroad monopolies realized that they could cash in on this homesickness. They started selling cheap excursion tickets for $1 or $2, marketing weekend trips back to the country. Add in the 1876 American Centennial, which sparked a massive national obsession with tracing one's family roots, and the modern family reunion was born. White families rented parks, printed out ledgers to prove their European ancestry. They had picnics. It was purely about nostalgia. But for Black folks, the first family reunions had nothing to do with potato salad and catching up. To understand the Black family reunion, you have to look at the transatlantic slave trade because everything starts there. Between 1790 and 1860, enslavers sold more than 1 million Black folks into brutal cotton and sugar fields in the Deep South. Tearing Black families apart wasn't a tragic accident. It was a deliberate business model to break the spirits, stop uprising, and obviously make millions of dollars. When emancipation happened in 1865, though, 4 million people were freed overnight, but that freedom didn't come with a tracking system. The United States government did nothing to reunite lost husbands, wives, children that had been sold away. So newly freed Black folks went to work. They created the very first version of the Black family reunion in the classified section of Black newspapers. We placed thousands of information wanted ads in papers like the Southwestern Christian Advocate. A single ad usually costs $1, $1.50, but you have to understand that math. For a newly freed person making literal pennies a day, trapped in the sharecropping system, $1.50 was a massive sum of money. It was often more than a week's wages. People spent their entire life savings to print physical descriptions of children who had been sold away 20 or 30 years ago. They paid money, printed ads, and hoped that someone would read it out loud in a church pulpit in another state. They searched for a scar on a cheek, a missing toe, the last known name of a person that had been bought. The first family reunions weren't parties. They were just trying to piece their families back together. Fast forward to the start of the Great Migration. Between 1916 and 1970, 6 million Black folks fled the South, and they took whatever they could carry on segregated trains to Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Oakland. They took factory jobs and built completely different lives. But the South still held their roots. They held their grandparents who was too old to make the trip, cousins who stayed to tide the land, and eventually we went back down to the South to visit. This is where the first modern Black family reunions were forged, driving back down to Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas in the 1930s, 1940s. It wasn't a vacation. It was incredibly dangerous. You couldn't just hop on a highway and enjoy the ride. The car gave Black folks mobility, but it also made them a target. Black drivers had to navigate hundreds of sundown towns. They couldn't pull over and eat at white-owned restaurants. They couldn't use the bathroom or gas stations off the highway. If your car broke down on a dirt road in some bumblefuck-ass town, you had zero backup. So this is where you start to see people start relying on things like the Negro Motorist Green Book to find safe houses. They packed shoebox lunches that wouldn't spoil in a hot car. They bought large, heavy cars so they had the physical space to sleep inside them instead of trying to rent a room at a white motel. They carried extra fan belts and spare tires and heavy gas cans in the trunk so they could survive the drive without having to stop. Every single trip down south was a massive risk, and it was funded by families pooling together money to make sure that everybody got home alive. So when we finally did show up in Mississippi, in Alabama, the family reunion, it was like a roll call. Before the internet, before cell phones, before landlines, this was the time of year where a fractured family could stand in one place and physically verify that everybody made it another year. They found out who got the union job up north, who had a baby, who was still trapped under the thumb of Jim Crow. But they couldn't rely on state parks or white-owned venues. During segregation, black folks were legally banned from public beaches and municipal parks. If a family of 200 people wanted to gather together for 2 or 3 days, they had to build their own venues themselves. Because local governments offered zero protection and zero resources, families had to operate like independent organizations. This is exactly why we have reunion dues, planning committees, treasurers today. They had to collect dues all year long. They pooled their money to rent black-owned spaces and wholesale food for hundreds of people just so we could safely gather for a weekend. And these weren't small backyard barbecues. As families grew over generations, the reunions scaled up to include hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. They rented out entire hotel blocks. Planning committees started meeting right after the last family reunion, setting up formal boards and presidents and secretaries. They built out 3-day itineraries, a Friday meet and greet, a Saturday picnic and workshop, and Sundays always ended with church service to ground the family together in faith and to give thanks for another year. Reunion committees did much more than just buy hot dogs. They functioned as an internal bank. If a cousin in Detroit was short on rent, the reunion fund could help them out. If a kid in Atlanta wanted to go to college but couldn't get a loan from a white bank, the family reunion committee wrote scholarship checks. If an elder passed, the reunion fund sometimes paid for their burial. They also used this weekend to educate the youth. White society is not teaching black history in school, so the family reunion sometimes became a formal classroom. Elders sat the youth down and taught them their family tree, passed down work ethic and survival skills. They made the kids sit down and listen, to understand black history, to understand why we were gathering at all, to make sure the bloodline and the ancestors' names weren't erased by a country who never wanted them to know where they came from in the first place. In the end, it's incredibly easy to look at the matching shirts, the electric slide, the spades tables, and see just another cookout. But when you look at the facts, the Black Family Reunion is a publicly funded safety net. Every matching shirt, every scholarship check, every roll call is a direct continuation of a system that started in 1865. It was built by people who looked at a country that tried to permanently break their bloodlines and simply refused to let that happen. Thank you. This has been One My Black History. I'm your host, Country Boy. This is the Black Family Reunion. I went to my wife's family reunion recently, and this got me thinking, because they were talking about, just meeting and dues and money and just the logistics of getting everyone together. And it just got me thinking about the history of family reunions. Anyway, I would like to thank all my financial contributors. I love every single one of you guys, specifically my people on YouTube who sat quietly as I didn't put their names in the roll call at the end of the video. But I have fixed that now, and I'm still sorry. I'm going to apologize again, and I'm still sorry. But I'd like to thank everybody who contributes, everybody who listens. If you'd like to continue to follow me, you can find me on Substack. I'm also on IG, and I have a fairly large Facebook group. You can find me in all those places. And thank you for coming out. God bless. Peace.